What if the real teachings of Jesus were never meant to be locked away in churches or filtered through layers of interpretation? Imagine stumbling on a secret archive at Nag Hammadi, opening a 2,000-year-old book hidden from the world, only to discover that Jesus' message was about awakening a power within yourself, one that never made it into the Bible. Most people have never heard of the Gospel of Thomas. But today, you'll see why its words could shake your beliefs to the core, and how these forbidden sayings might offer the spiritual clarity you've always longed for. Hidden wisdom sometimes waits in the most unexpected places. In 1945, a farmer in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, broke open a sealed clay jar buried for centuries. Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for soil when his shovel struck something unexpected. Local law said long-buried jars might contain anything from treasure to dangerous secrets, so his community watched in suspense. What he found didn't look valuable at first: old, fragile books written in a language he didn't recognize. He and local villagers eventually uncovered a cache of sealed jars, each holding fragile Coptic manuscripts. At the time, no one could have guessed just how significant these texts would become. Inside those jars were 13 leather-bound papyrus codices, now known as the Nag Hammadi Library. The texts were written in Coptic, the language of Egyptian Christians, and included a wide range of writings, some of which had been completely lost to history. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas, a book that stood out immediately. Unlike the familiar Gospels, it contained no stories about miracles or the birth of Jesus. Instead, it was a collection of 114 sayings, each attributed to Jesus, and each inviting the reader to look inward for spiritual truth. The initial reaction to the find was quiet. The villagers didn't realize what they had, and the codices passed through several hands before reaching the Coptic Museum in Cairo. Scholars were intrigued by the sheer variety of texts. Alongside the Gospel of Thomas were writings like the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Truth, and the Apocryphon of John. These texts didn't just offer new stories. They revealed a whole spectrum of early Christian thought that had rarely been seen before. Many of the writings emphasized personal spiritual experience and knowledge, ideas that were often at odds with the more familiar teachings of the Church. The Gospel of Thomas in particular puzzled and fascinated scholars. Its format was striking. There were no narrative stories, no healings or exorcisms, and no attempt to explain who Jesus was through genealogy or prophecy. Instead, each saying stood alone, often in the form of a riddle or a challenge. Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death, the opening line declares. Some sayings echoed familiar gospel teachings, but others seemed to contradict them or offer a radically different perspective. For example, in Thomas, Jesus says, "The kingdom is inside you and outside you." This teaching shifts the focus away from external authority and places the source of spiritual truth within the individual. As news of the discovery spread, excitement grew among scholars, but so did caution. The Gospel of Thomas and its companion texts challenged long-held assumptions about Christian origins. The very existence of these books suggested that early Christianity was far more diverse than most people realized. The texts had been buried deliberately, perhaps to protect them from destruction, during a time when certain teachings were being labeled heretical and suppressed. The question of why someone would hide these books in the desert became just as important as what the books actually said. Translating the Gospel of Thomas was not a simple academic exercise. Some feared that making these teachings public would disrupt established beliefs and undermine the authority of the Church. Early translations were sometimes shared in secret, and debates unfolded about whether these words should be released at all. The Gospel of Thomas didn't just add to the story of Jesus. It called the entire foundation of religious authority into question by suggesting that spiritual knowledge was available directly to anyone willing to seek it. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, and especially the Gospel of Thomas, forced scholars and religious leaders to reconsider what they thought they knew about early Christianity. The texts revealed that there were once competing ideas about who Jesus was and what his message meant. Some groups emphasized inner enlightenment and direct experience of the divine, while others built traditions and hierarchies to preserve what they saw as the true faith. This find didn't just open a window into the past, it raised difficult questions about why certain voices were included in the official story and others were left out. The Gospel of Thomas stands as a reminder that the history of Christianity was never as simple or unified as it might seem. Its sayings challenge us to ask where spiritual authority comes from and who gets to decide what is true. These questions about authority and inclusion set the stage for the next, even more pressing issue. What would make the leaders of the early church so uneasy about a single gospel that they decided to leave it out of the Bible? Early Christian groups competed fiercely over which teachings should guide believers. In the decades and centuries after Jesus' death, there was no single agreed-upon doctrine. Instead, communities across the Mediterranean debated what it truly meant to follow Jesus, and which stories and teachings should define their faith. In the midst of these debates, the Gospel of Thomas quietly emerged, presenting a message that stood apart from the growing consensus. The heart of the difference lies in how the Gospel of Thomas frames the teachings of Jesus. Unlike the books that would eventually form the New Testament, Thomas presents Jesus not as a distant authority or a judge handing down rules, but as a wisdom teacher. His guidance is personal, inviting each person to search for truth within themselves. The sayings in Thomas do not focus on rituals or requirements set by a religious hierarchy. Instead, they point away from external authority and toward individual discovery. The implication is clear. Spiritual transformation is an inner process. And organized structures or intermediaries are not necessary for a direct connection to the divine. For a church trying to establish order and unity, this was a serious challenge. As the early church developed, it became more organized, with leaders setting out doctrines, appointing priests, and defining rituals. Their authority was built on the belief that spiritual truth and salvation were accessible through the Church's teachings and sacraments. The Gospel of Thomas threatened this foundation by suggesting that each person could access the sacred on their own without the Church as a gatekeeper. In Thomas, the role of priests, rituals, and collective traditions is diminished. What matters most is the individual's own awakening. This tension was not lost on the leaders of the early church. Bishop Irenaeus, writing around 180 CE, labeled Thomas's ideas heretical because they undermined church authority. In his work against heresies, Irenaeus argued fiercely for a unified doctrine and condemned any teachings that deviated from the growing orthodoxy. He and others worried that if people followed texts like Thomas, they might ignore the Church's leadership and drift into beliefs that could threaten both unity and control. The Gospel of Thomas's emphasis on personal discovery is evident in its sayings. For example, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This message shifts the focus from obedience to external rules to a responsibility for one's own spiritual journey. The idea that wisdom and the spark of the divine are available to every person without mediation made it difficult for the early church to justify its growing structures and authority. When the time came to decide which books would make up the official Christian canon, church leaders were strategic. They selected texts that supported their authority and reinforced the need for institutional guidance. The Gospel of Thomas, with its call for inner enlightenment and its lack of interest in hierarchy, was deliberately left out. Its exclusion was as much about preserving the church's power as it was about doctrine. By shaping the canon, the church could define what counted as truth and ensure that its own role remained central. Comparing Thomas with the four canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, reveals both similarities and deep differences. About half the sayings in Thomas echo familiar teachings, but others go in a different direction. Sometimes contradicting or expanding on what the canonical texts present. In Thomas, Jesus repeatedly invites listeners to seek meaning in their own hearts and experiences, rather than relying on external authority or fixed beliefs. The Gospel of Thomas was not forgotten by accident. It was set aside on purpose, its message considered too risky for a church intent on building a unified community under clear leadership. The challenge it posed, encouraging each person to find the sacred within, was simply too great for an institution invested in control. Understanding why Thomas was excluded helps you see just how different its teachings are from what became mainstream Christianity. These sayings open up another way of thinking about spiritual growth. One that doesn't depend on miracles, rituals, or institutions, but on what you discover inside yourself. The Gospel of Thomas presents a radically different vision of Jesus, not as a distant authority or miracle worker, but as a guide who invites you to turn inward and uncover a deeper truth. Here, the focus isn't on dramatic stories or lists of rules. Instead, you're met with 114 short, sometimes cryptic sayings, each one like a puzzle designed to prompt reflection and personal discovery. Imagine feeling guided by a voice that points inward, not outward. How might that change your day? One of the most striking sayings is, "The kingdom is inside you, and it is outside you." This line doesn't point to a far-off paradise or a reward dispensed by others. It suggests that what is sacred is both within your reach and all around you, present in every moment. The message turns traditional expectations upside down. Instead of searching for answers in distant places or from religious authorities, you're encouraged to look within and notice what's already unfolding in your own experience. Another saying pushes this idea even further. "Split wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me." This cryptic advice suggests that the sacred isn't hidden away in special rituals or buildings, but can be found in the ordinary and everyday. It's a call to discover the divine in the world around you, in the simple act of paying attention. The Gospel of Thomas repeatedly challenges you to see the extraordinary in what's right in front of you, and to trust in your own ability to recognize it. The teachings in Thomas don't come with formal creeds or long sermons. Jesus avoids lengthy explanations. His words are brief, like prompts for personal insight. Each saying asks you to pause and consider, what does this mean for me? Rather than prescribing a set path, the Gospel places the responsibility for interpretation and growth on the individual. The emphasis is on direct experience, quiet reflection, honest self-questioning, and a willingness to see the world with new eyes. This approach isn't unique to Christianity. Many mystical traditions, from Buddhism to Hinduism, also prioritize personal realization over external rules. In these traditions, awakening comes not from following a fixed set of instructions, but from moments of clarity and insight that arise in everyday life. The Gospel of Thomas fits into this universal thread, offering a pathway to spiritual growth that is open, personal, and immediate. Consider the saying, "Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death." This isn't about memorizing words or accepting dogma. It's about uncovering a deeper understanding that transforms your relationship with fear and limitation. The promise here is not just about life after death, but about experiencing a kind of freedom and timelessness in the present. The goal is to move beyond surface meanings and find a truth that feels real and alive within you. Another powerful teaching is the call to become as children. This isn't a call to naivete or ignorance, but to a state of openness and curiosity. Children ask questions without embarrassment and approach the world with wonder. In the context of Thomas, this means letting go of rigid beliefs and embracing a mindset that is receptive and willing to learn. Spiritual growth, then, is less about accumulating knowledge and more about making space for new insights to emerge. Central to all these sayings is the idea that each person carries a hidden spark of the divine. The Gospel of Thomas doesn't just suggest that knowledge of the sacred is possible, it claims that it is already present, waiting to be awakened. This echoes the teachings of many mystical traditions, which hold that the divine is not separate from us, but an intrinsic part of who we are. The journey, then, is not about seeking something outside ourselves, but about recognizing and nurturing what is already within. As you reflect on these teachings, you may notice a sense of both challenge and possibility. The Gospel of Thomas doesn't offer reassurance that spiritual truth will be handed down from on high. Instead, it invites you to become your own seeker, to question and to trust your own experience. But if these teachings are so empowering and accessible, it raises a difficult question. Why would wisdom like this need to be hidden or suppressed for centuries? Throughout history, the struggle between institutional authority and personal spiritual experience has shaped which teachings have been preserved and which have faded from view. The story of the Gospel of Thomas is a clear example of this ongoing tension. When church leaders began to define the boundaries of Christian belief, they also assumed the role of gatekeepers, deciding which writings carried divine authority and which did not. The Gospel of Thomas, with its emphasis on direct access to wisdom, presented a challenge to this centralized control. Its message placed spiritual insight within reach of anyone, not just those in power. That alone was enough to make it a target for exclusion. When early Christian leaders gathered to determine the contents of the official Bible, their choices were about more than just accuracy or tradition. These decisions were deeply tied to questions of power: who would speak for the faith, and who would be trusted to interpret its most sacred stories. Including a text like Thomas, which encouraged personal revelation and bypassed the need for institutional mediation, threatened the very structure they were trying to build. So, just as the Book of Enoch was cut from many Greek copies by the late 4th century, despite early Christians like Justin Martyr citing Enoch, Thomas was omitted from the final New Testament canon around the Council of Nicaea era. In both cases, the removal of these texts was a deliberate act to reinforce a unified, controllable doctrine. The suppression of alternative voices didn't stop at the level of manuscripts. Once a text was labeled as heretical or dangerous, the consequences could be severe. People who held on to the ideas found in books like Thomas or Enoch risked being cast out of their communities, accused of heresy, or worse. Accusations could lead to banishment or even persecution. The cost of embracing a different spiritual perspective was often isolation or destruction of reputation. For many, the threat of being branded a heretic was enough to keep them silent, reinforcing the authority of those who controlled the narrative. This pattern of exclusion wasn't limited to a single moment in history. Over the centuries, religious authorities continued to guard the boundaries of accepted belief, often at the expense of diversity and discovery. The loss of texts like the Gospel of Thomas and the Book of Enoch narrowed the scope of spiritual conversation, leaving only those teachings that supported the dominant view. Yet, the ideas that were pushed aside never disappeared completely. They lingered on the margins, sometimes hidden, sometimes whispered about, always carrying the potential to inspire those who found them. In recent times, the rediscovery of the Gospel of Thomas and other forbidden texts has reignited interest in these alternative spiritual paths. The story of a farmer unearthing ancient manuscripts in Nag Hammadi is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a symbol of the persistent human drive to seek wisdom beyond official boundaries. Modern spiritual seekers are drawn to these lost teachings not just for their novelty, but because they offer a different way of understanding the sacred. One that emphasizes personal experience and inner guidance over external authority. This renewed curiosity reflects a shift in how many people approach faith today. There is a growing willingness to question traditional teachings and to look for answers outside established institutions. For some, reading the Gospel of Thomas is a way to reclaim a sense of agency in their spiritual lives. To explore questions that have long been considered off-limits, and to find meaning in the process of personal discovery. The appeal of these suppressed texts lies in their promise that real spiritual clarity is possible for anyone willing to look within. As you consider the story of the Gospel of Thomas and its journey from exclusion to rediscovery, you might notice how this struggle between authority and inner truth continues to play out. The choices made centuries ago still shape the boundaries of religious life today, but they also invite you to think differently about where wisdom comes from and how it can be accessed. If you're wondering how these ancient teachings could make a difference in your own life, the next step is to explore what it means to apply them. What happens when you stop searching everywhere else for answers and simply listen to what your own heart is telling you? The Gospel of Thomas, after centuries in silence, offers more than historical curiosity. It's a living invitation to change the way you approach your own life. Its brief, riddle-like sayings aren't just for scholars or mystics. They're practical tools for anyone who wants to experience a different kind of spiritual clarity. Rather than imposing rules or demanding loyalty to tradition, Thomas shifts your focus inward, showing you how to start from your own experience. Many of the sayings in Thomas are intentionally open-ended, almost like gentle riddles. The text doesn't hand you answers. Instead, it points you back to your own awareness, asking you to notice your thoughts, feelings, and the reality of being alive right now. This is where its core message becomes clear. The kingdom of God isn't a distant place or a future reward. It's an inner state, accessible through self-discovery, not through external validation or ritual. Spiritual life, in this view, isn't about meeting expectations or pleasing others. It's about returning to yourself again and again until you recognize the spark that's always been there. Applying the hidden teachings of Thomas can start simply. Inspired by how Thomas uses short prompts, try pausing each morning to ask, "What is my hidden treasure today?" This mirrors the gospel style, short, open-ended, and designed to spark reflection. At first, you might notice your mind filling with doubts or distractions. That's natural. But as you return to this practice, you may find it easier to sense what feels true in your own heart. Over time, this daily self-inquiry helps you break the habit of seeking approval from others or measuring your worth by outside standards. You might have once felt out of step with rote doctrines. What if these sayings set you free to trust your own questions? Instead of feeling pressured to conform, you can begin to notice your own instincts and insights. As you practice, a quiet confidence can take root, one that isn't based on pride but on genuine self-knowledge. Compassion often follows. When you see your own struggles more clearly, you find it easier to understand others, and judgment softens. Spiritual growth begins to happen from within, not because you're following a prescribed path, but because you're responding honestly to what you discover inside. This emphasis on direct experience isn't unique to Thomas. Similar to Gnostic and Eastern mystics, Thomas sees direct insight as the truest path. The Gospel's focus on self-knowledge and inner awakening echoes traditions that value personal realization over external authority. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, and self-inquiry, now common in many modern spiritual circles, reflect this same principle. People everywhere are moving away from rigid rules and towards a spirituality grounded in lived experience. The teachings of Thomas fit naturally into this shift, offering a framework for self-discovery that feels both ancient and relevant. Recognizing your own divine spark can also help you heal old wounds and let go of limiting beliefs. The message is simple but powerful. You carry something sacred within you, no matter what doubts or judgments you've faced. By honoring your own journey and trusting your insights, you begin to reclaim the power that may have been lost to fear or disapproval. Old stories, those that say you're not enough or that someone else controls your worth, start to lose their hold. The experience of the kingdom of God within becomes tangible, something you can sense in your daily life, not just a distant idea. By exploring the wisdom in the Gospel of Thomas, you gather practical tools for seeing life with new eyes. Each quiet pause and honest question brings you closer to a life that feels authentic and connected. Even if others see these teachings as unconventional, they reveal that real awakening is an inner process, one that grows from listening to yourself and learning to trust what you find. Some truths wait beneath the surface, ready for those willing to seek them out. When you begin to apply the hidden teachings of Thomas, you may discover that what seemed lost was always within reach, waiting to be found. The Gospel of Thomas stands as a missing piece, offering a path that shifts your focus away from external authority and toward your own inner spark. By listening closely to the quiet wisdom inside, you start a journey that is truly your own. Each saying invites you to reflect, question, and notice what feels real for you. If this sparked your curiosity, share one question you'd ask Thomas's Jesus in the comments. The missing piece is within. What will you discover when you look?